With a few more abortion cases, page 978, city of Akron. So, Roe versus Wade struck down abortion bans, all laws banning abortion before the last trimester. Now, most abortions take place before the trimester, before the last trimester. I mean, if a mother wants to have abortion, she doesn't wait until the baby becomes this big. So, Roe versus Wade basically made legalized almost all abortions in the United States. At the same time, so that's one part of Roe versus Wade. And I told you, I drew a graph in the last week, how one compelling interest increases over time, and it becomes compelling at the point of the beginning of the last trimester. So, interest of the baby, right? Not the interest of the baby, the government's interest in saving potentiality of a personhood, right? 잠재적 인간, 인간의 잠재적 인간 가치를 유지해야 되는 그 공익은 점점 높아지는데, when does it become compelling? That's T3, T2, that's T1. So this one, it becomes compelling, which is like 7 months. Now, there was another compelling interest, which was the health of the mother. That also becomes compelling at the beginning of the second trimester. But because it was for the health of the mother, right? Because it was the health of the mother, they couldn't ban abortion. They could only put reasonable restrictions on procedure, right? To protect mother's health. So this second part of Roe versus Wade. Now the first part of Roe versus Wade legalized almost all abortions in the United States by banning, right? Because the interest doesn't become compelling before the third trimester. Any law prohibiting abortion before this point becomes unconstitutional, right? So now almost all abortions are legal. The second part of Roe versus Wade made it possible to put procedural restriction to protect mother's health. And you'll see in city of Akron various restrictions. So section 1870.03, the Akron Ordinance, I'm looking at the second paragraph of city of Akron. Section 1870.03 requires that any second trimester abortion must be performed in a hospital. Okay. So since Roe versus Wade said, hey, after T1, you can't put procedural restrictions. Okay? So City of Akron said, okay, then all abortions must be done in a hospital to protect mother's health. What does the court say about that? No, not necessary. Okay. 그러니까 그럼 hospital 아니면 뭐냐? 그러니까 한국에도 병원이 급이 있죠. 뭐 병원, 의원. 네. 그러니까 의원에서도 할 수 있는 건데 왜 병원에서 해야 되냐? 이런 얘기예요. Okay, section 1870.06 No abortion shall be performed except with the informed written consent of the pregnant woman, freely and without coercion. (1870.06) provides in order to ensure that the consent for an abortion is truly informed consent, the woman must be orally informed by her attending physician of the status of her pregnancy, blah, blah, blah. So that so how would you evaluate that? 1870.06. According to Roe versus Wade. Is this a restriction on woman who wants to have abortion? What do you think? Does this restrict the mother in trying to have abortion? Little bit, right? Requires informed written consent. And this kicks in before the second trimester begins. Now, the restriction for the purpose of protecting health, it can come in only when? After T1. Because that's when government's interest in protecting mother's health becomes compelling. Okay? But here, it kicks in any time, right? Because all abortions must require informed written consent. So does this mean that does did Roe versus Wade say there can be no restriction at all on abortion during the first trimester? It's not clear, but the court says, hey, this is okay, right? Making sure when woman makes a decision, it's done on informed consent. Okay, how about the next one? (1870.06b) subsection 3 says, requires the physician to inform his patient that the unborn child is a human life from the moment of conception. What do you think about that? Is this a barrier to women's right to have abortion? What do you think? Is that a restriction? having doctor tell the mother, you are about to kill a human life. The court thought that it was a serious restriction and struck it down. How about 1870.06c? The attending physician must inform the woman of the particular risks associated with her own pregnancy, provide her with at least a general description of medical instructions to be followed subsequent to the abortion. The court says, 3 lines below, requiring physicians personally to discuss the abortion decision with each patient may in some cases add to the cost. So the idea is that it required the doctor to tell the mother personally the risks. But usually it's the nurse, right, who tells you when you go to hospital, when you get a checkup, nurse tells you a lot of risks. Here, the law requires the doctor to do it, and the court says, hey, that makes abortion too expensive. 1870.07 prohibits physician from performing an abortion until 24 hours after the pregnant woman signs a consent form. So, a woman wants to have an abortion, going to a clinic. Doctors are required to give 24-hour wait. Only after which abortion can be had. Is this also a restriction on a woman's right to have abortion? Yes. Struck down again. I think most of these restrictions could be evaluated different if applied only to abortions after T1. Okay? Because after T1, there is at least one compelling governmental interest. What is it? Protecting mother's health. So if these restrictions were limited to the second or third trimester abortions, maybe it could be constitutional. Okay. Now, you might be wondering, oh, that's a nice graph. Professor, why didn't you draw that graph for all other cases beforehand? Well, those other cases, the interest didn't change over time. This graph is unique to abortion cases because the compelling interest changed over time. That's why you need a graph. So you can see, like, a case like this will be will make a very interesting, exam questions, right? Like changing different, coming up with the different variations of restrictions. Okay. Page 980. How about spousal consent? So the law requiring men to be notified of the abortion. Is that restriction on woman's right to have abortion? Yes. But isn't there yet another interest involved here? Father's right? What do you think? What do you think? Actually, there is a split among justices, right? The majority says, all the way at the bottom of page 359, the obvious fact is that when the wife and the husband disagree on this decision, the view of only one can prevail, inasmuch as it is the woman who physically bears the child and who is the more directly and immediately affected by pregnancy, as between the two, the balance weighs in her favor. Okay, so that's so the court is saying, hey, you cannot give the husband veto power. I mean, consent means if the husband says no, cannot have it, cannot have abortion. Again, applies to in all abortions. All abortions at all trimesters. How about parental consent? Parents having veto power. Again, unconstitutional. How about parental notification? You know, by the way, we are talking about minor mother, right? We are not talking about adult mother, but minor mother. When it comes to parental consent, when it comes to parental notification, we are talking about mothers who are, we are talking about, you know, minor teenage mothers. What do you think? So page 361, H.L.V. Matheson concerned the Utah statute requiring physician to notify the parents or guardian of any minor woman on whom abortion is to be performed. The court upheld the statute as applied to minor women who are living with or dependent upon their parents, who are not emancipated by marriage or otherwise, and who have made no claim or showing as to their maturity. Okay. So, I mean, it's a minor, right? We are talking about under 18. For many other surgeries, I mean, even if it's not abortion, for major surgeries, they'll have to seek, they'll have to send notifications to parents. Why not abortion? Okay. All right, any question about abortion? Okay, then now, before we move on to other cases, one thing that I want you to remember is that the fact that government has a compelling interest to do something doesn't mean that government can do anything and everything. Because to meet the strict scrutiny, it has to meet the end test, but also has to meet the means test. Remember? So not only the ends have to be really important, compelling, the means to the ends, right, have to be narrowly tailored to the ends. Right? Remember that. Okay, now we're going to go to fundamental interest cases. This was not part of the previous semester of constitutional law, but because the previous semesters we focused on the difference between American constitutional law and Korean constitutional law, so I omitted a lot of stuff where they converge. But this semester we are focusing more on American constitutional law, so I thought it's better for you to learn as many constitutional law cases as possible. So you now have a PDF, right? Okay, so let's look at that. It's not in the book. It's a PDF distributed to you by the TA. And we'll now look at page 847. Harper versus Virginia State Board of Elections. What happened in this case? The court invalidated a Virginia law requiring the payment of a poll tax not to exceed $50 as a precondition for voting. Okay. Again, whenever you see a question like this, fact like this, what do? The first thing, decide on standard of review. To decide on the standard of review, what do you have to do? Well, you have to decide whether this is equal protection case or substantive due process case or free speech case. What does it fall under? The court says the right to vote in state elections is nowhere expressly mentioned in the Constitution. It is argued that the right to vote in state elections is implicit, particularly by reason of the First Amendment. We do not stop to canvass the relation between voting and political expression. For it is enough to say that once the franchise granted to the electoral lines may not be drawn which are inconsistent with the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. So, how is this evaluated? Is this evaluated as equality case or substantive due process? Equality case or liberty case? When I say liberty case, I'm talking about substantive due process. Right? The court writes this up as equal protection case. So discrimination against who? Discrimination against people who cannot pay $50 to vote or who feel burdened in paying $50. What would happen under Korean constitutional law if you are supposed to pay like $10,000 for voting? Will a lot of people give up on voting because of that $10,000? What do you think? Just think about it. This is not a legal question. Do you think that people around you, your friends, some of them will give up on voting, finding 만원 as an obstacle? Having,
it's more than an hour's pay of part-time.
I agree. I think a lot of people will not vote. No, you're you think not? I think a lot of people just give up on voting if the state charges any money. Then the line is drawn. The line is drawn between people who can pay and people who can pay and people who can not pay $50. And what level of review should be applied to this wealth? It's not racial classification, but wealth classifications, right? What level of review? Is this really a discrimination against poor people? Or is it not really discrimination, but the price is just too high? See, it is not really wealth discrimination in a sense that poor people are given something less for being poor. All the people are charged the same price. It's just that that price is higher. That price is more burdensome for poor people. Okay. Then good. That's how the reasoning is never recognized as voting. You might sending a kid important. Parents can take care of kids as well. It's not important. Something the state has a. Okay. Into that. That's in your PDF. Okay, the next case in your PDF is it? Let's get it together. You don't have PDF? No. Okay, it's Kramer. In Kramer, New York Education or Pearl District residents may vote only if they own real property or are police local. So to be able to vote in a board election, you had to or lease a property or have enrolled. So what does the court say about this? Review. The court says, right? a burden. It will be bigger burden for poorer people. So in that sense, it can also be it can be a matter of inequality. What will happen in that case, in the hypothetical? So you just read Harper, and now in your exam you got a question about having to pay $150 per month for childcare. How would you decide? Constitutional or unconstitutional? Constitutional, raise your hand. Unconstitutional, raise your hand. Good. Okay. Can you explain why can you explain your answer?
Sending a child to a kindergarten is not a problem.
Good. Good. That's how the reasoning should go. It was never recognized as a fundamental right. Not as important as voting. You might say, hey, sending a kid to school is very important. But parents can take care of kids as well. I'm not saying it's not important, but is it something the state has a duty to provide? Okay. Yes.
Would your case change the result if the kindergarten were changed to something else, like elementary school?
That we are getting to that. That's the last case in your PDF. Okay, the next case in your PDF is Kramer, right? Is it? Let's look at it together. You don't have PDF? Okay, where is it? Oh, 이렇게 빨리 올라가. Okay, it's Kramer. Okay. All right, so in Kramer, New York education law provides that in certain New York school district, residents may vote in the school district election only if they own or lease real property within the district, or are parents, children enrolled in the local public schools. So to be able to vote, right? To be able to vote in a school board election, you had to own or lease a property, or have a child enrolled. So, what does the court say about this? What standard of review? The court says strict scrutiny. Right? Page 852, the second paragraph. In determining whether or not this law violates the Equal Protection Clause, we must give the statute a close and exacting examination. Why? Because the statutes distributing the franchise is a franchise, 투표권을 franchise라고 그래. 맥도날드 얘기하는 게 아니고, 영어가 이래서 어렵죠. 같은 단어 가지고 다양하게 쓰니까. Constitutes the foundation of our representative society. So basically, Harper already decided that voting is a fundamental interest, and any discrimination on voting, even if it doesn't happen along racial, even if it doesn't happen along the lines of race or gender, it still has to be strictly scrutinized. What does the court say about that? Page 852, third paragraph from the bottom. The state has a legitimate interest in limiting the franchise in school district elections to those primarily interested in such elections, and the state may reasonably or permissibly conclude that even but also living there, but under in somebody else's house, under somebody else's. It's not really. It doesn't meet means test. What does the dissenters put up? Clearly, state residents have a greater stake held within its boundaries than do. Likewise, it is entitled to suppose that residents regarding state affairs then will be more likely to vote responsibly. So, if the state just decides the parents or lessees, rational. But the thing is, rational in the strict school, they have to prove very, very important. They have to prove that it's only the parents, only the lessees in the school board election. Okay. Cases show how now as think whether reviewed due process, right? Is that a discrimination or is it a result? It's like you need a doctor. It can, right? But depending on how it analyzes a liberty case or case. So, case, it doesn't make sense. That's why the law court is saying, even if the subject is fundamental right, you have to apply strict. The lines are not race on the race suspect classifications. What's the next case? Let's go to Reynolds versus. Sorry. Okay. Sims. So legislate the owned by representatives. Seems natural how they left to so legislature. Now the question, depending on how between people living. So let's say there is 500,000 people. 100,000. If they representative and people in B also send representative, who is being discriminated against? People living in A, or who is getting more power? People in voice than people in A, right? What the court is talking about. A predominant consideration in digital apportionment scheme constitutes violative of rights asserting that alleged personal in nature. Since the right of suffrage in a franchise, right of suffrage matter in a free and preservative of other rights, any allegation to vote must be meticulously. Review is used again. Now, what does the court in applying the strict? Legislators represent takers. racial apportionment scheme constitutes invidious discrimination, violative of rights asserted under the Equal Protection Clause is that rights alleged impaired are individual and personal in nature. Since the right of suffrage는 프랜차이즈랑 같은 말이죠. Right of suffrage is a fundamental matter in a free and democratic society and is a preservative of other basic civil political rights. Any alleged infringement of the right of citizens to vote must be carefully and meticulously scrutinized. So what standard review is used? Again, strict scrutiny. Now, what does the court say in applying the strict scrutiny? The court says, legislators represent people, not trees or acres. When the districts, they do it, put people who are with one another, living with one another, district. I mean, for people in Seoul, they elect one person. Because people absolutely not know, but share the same interest. So it's a natural island, mountain. The natural communication, people's cohabitation, as boundary. And the court says even key is representing people. Back then, worked as a So, let's look at page 1, 2, 5, 6, 6 paragraph. The court holding that as a federal constitution, both houses of a state legislature population basis, we mean that a state make an effort to construct of equal population as it is a practical impossible that each one has all citizens or voters. So long as the are based on legitimate consideration of a rational state policy, some deviation is possible. Okay. This Holland, hey, when you electoral districts, consider all of this, right in the middle. Economic or other sorts of grouping, graphic considerations, desire to ensure effectively settled areas, of access to citizens to the areas of occupation, urban and rural power of voters in the state. So let's just take one example, and urban power. Who are better educated? People in the cities. Are more sensitive? People in the city. Who are or whose occupations are farmers, they more important than, for instance, politically given some for carrying out, public purposes of keep the field green, keeping the nature urbanized to go look at. If you go to Switzerland countries, you see this. They receive government support. Field greens actually look well. So country usually rural district B is like district A. Even now in Korea, many more people one urban congressional than into a national district. Problem is, how much nation can there be? How much? I mean, if you are interested, look, Thompson. uh, three, a deviation maximum population cannot be metric. So this is the smallest district. Okay, this is the smallest district, and this is so district and largest district will be the maximum deviation. Districts, if you want to find the big for, you'll take the biggest district difference, right? Should not be. If this is the largest, what? Fine. So let's 1,000. Let's more than 10% means 10% with 40,000. Here, what's the difference? Right. But what's so this is constitutional. Just to be generous, let's say it's smaller. The district is 150,000. Then 10% is what? Again, constitutional. Now you study, and the country has some numbers on this. More strict in Korea or the U.S. You think it's what's the? Oh. $33. Yeah, but I think they've been doing before early court cases. It cannot be right. Twice, that means 2 votes. But in the gap, 83, it has been strict, much more strict than Korean. What was your country again? Turkmenistan. You'll be the first one in your and design the system. Okay. Case. No, Griffin versus Illinois. 8-9 Griffin versus Illinois. 리어브 모바일 vs 볼드죠. 끝까지 있나요? Let's look at Griffin versus California. So in Griffin, 한국에서는 공짜로 다 조서라고 합니다. 스크립트를 매우 자세하고요. 녹취록 조서가 아니라 녹취록을 만들어요. 녹취록을 만들려면 속기들이 들어요. 에 대해서 that state must furnish 가난한 and then with a free trial transcript is necessary for adequate view. The court said is of due process and equal procedures in criminal trials which invidious discriminations between persons. Ability to pay cost in to a defendant's guilt be used as an excuse of a fair trial. It is true that state is not federal counsel courts or a right of. 여기서 이제 왜 하면 사실 한국에서는 재판 조서 서면 보고 그냥 하지. 재판 조서를 보고 그 재판을 잡아내서 왜냐하면 사실 판단을 배심원이 하니까 재판에서 뭘 들어 어떤 증거에 노출됐냐 배심원들이 쓸 수 있다. 증거는 제시 안 되게 이런 것들을 이제 다 잡아내서 이제 하기 때문에 이 재판 조서관에 녹취록이 필요한 거예요. 없으면 항소를 할 수가 없겠죠. 그래서 right of so all the way equal justice were the kind of trends upon the amount of money destitute defendant could appellate review as a defense transcript. Case or liberty case like this, how would you? Oh, you have to file transcript. For file. So discrimination against the people to buy trial transcripts. Restriction on. The answer is it doesn't whether you handle equality because the decisions have shaped the law the way you apply the claim. Criminal interest compelling as means narrowly tailored interest. You ask. In this case, distinguish whether it's a liberty equality case, but just for right to file. Okay, so we'll talk about California. We'll take a break. California, Connecticut. Colombia denies residents who have not resided 1 year in their application for success. So, you just near exam and that limits 자, 다시. So the limits benefits only to people who lived in for this. Why there is requirement? There is help in a minimum living food. You need the one you arrive in. You cannot say says you have to wait. Think that why do you think rule? Sure. Page 2 to the last paragraph. Appellate requirement as a protectical integrity of state people who require are likely to become state welfare programs. If the argument runs, if such in the jurisdiction by denying them during the first year, state programs substantial of indigent. So why they are doing it, and how are you going to analyze the case or equality case? If it's a case, it is a discrimination. Right. Strict scrutiny, or what level of review do you apply? It's not really about length of stay, right? All right, so it's welfare is a fun right, like voting, right to trial. Usually by, so we just need to read as much as possible. That's why I'm going through many cases. A case that says welfare is a fundamental right.
I'm not sure if this is
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but logically, welfare basic needs link right to life. So we could logically apply them, right? Are we allowed to actually solely
Well, prior about right to abortion. Right to abortion is considered fundamental, but that takes away mean that the state has to provide abortion services, right? Yes, welfare is all the important stuff. But taking that away here. The issue is whether I did. So welfare has not been considered. Now, right fundamental because for democracy, right to vote, period. Now, right to trial, fundamental because right to trial is rule of law. Right? 법치주의에서 아무것도 못하는. For right to vote, it is like taking, right? But here, trying to take money away. The question to provide it. So the fundamentalness or fundamental if it's not fundamental interest, it's not strictly used. Even if you analyze as right, receive, right to receive. Even if you welfare as a liberty problem because it's not fundamental. Left with the rational basis. Is that what the court does? The right. The court believes in what right to travel. So Kuocw recognizes that the nature of constitutional concepts of personal all citizens be free to travel our land by statute, rules, burden, or restrict this movement. We have the source of the right to travel to particular constitutional provision. Suffices that as the constitutional right to travel is a position fundamental to the concept. It is a right and repeatedly. So this is not just interstate, from state to state. The court is what's happening here? Interstate, from state to state, because they cannot get. They'll have to start move from justifies applying strict. Paragraph, page 9. Let's So the second paragraph, the court would reject appellant's argument on relationship between the waiting will suffice for in moving from Colombia, appellants will exercise and any classification which is such of that right unless shown a compelling governmental interest constitutional. So the scrutiny. And the state makes fine the travel ban requirement. For instance, so there are several justifications. Keeping the state money intact, but the court is saying, page at the top paragraph, aggression by needy persons into admissible. You cannot reject people because that's what's going to happen. Residence requirement on welfare, people will be able to get in. So the court is saying that is just simply not legitimate interest. It's not interest. Keep purpose of protecting tax legitimate. I mean, the second justification bottom on page 907. Appellant's valid classifications may be distinguished between new and old residents they have made to the community through. But this will bar new residents from school, police, and fire protection. Indeed, it will permit the state to, according to the past tax. The Equal Protection Clause prohibits state services. 많이 낸 사람 뭔가 혜택을 받아야 되지 않나? 이거는 그렇게 혜택 못 받죠. 낸 적이 없거든. 세금을 더 많이 서비스를 받아야 되는가? 그래서 여기 보면은 이 부분은 사실은 인용이 안 돼 있죠. 이런 판례는 없어요. 사실 하고 있는. 거버먼트 서비스를 이런 식으로 제공해서 안 됐지만 실제로 주장에 대해서. So this case shows how the court in causation, any other right is affected. This welfare. In spirit, depending on whether you are if you are traveling, you are not getting. To travel is considered interstate. Is considered court could trigger strict scrutiny. Under the strict scrutiny from nations. So keeping the of people who lived along page 9, but they all fail, right? Okay, any question or comment about Peter versus Thompson? Yes.
Well, in this case,
Point. Good point. So, people, they're not really taking away abortion. They're not really like they are taking away right to travel, the right to. One of the creative what the dissenters are saying. Look at page 909. 2. Although this restraint part operate as a limitation since their constitutionality 더 밑에 보면 than the little support to the view that merely because it burdens rights. For travel itself is not prohibited. Also 11 again paragraph, the second smaller Shapiro did not involve in no criminal stay was enforced, nor was there tax on entry or departure of individual right through means of respect to defendant states were no worse moves. To be sure, the defective destination has to remain benefits made available to new residents that would make the state more in any way ordinarily those who travel. Indeed, those who do provided no welfare system unavailable plaintiffs would have constituted exactly right to travel. To pay welfare to long the burden of the plaintiff's right to travel. 아예 웰페어가 없는 주 그럼 이제 살았는지 안 살았는지 그러니까 영향이 없는 거 아니냐. 직설적인 결과가 발생하는. But still a good so opening If you can apply to expand, you get more points. Okay, yes.
Also, in general problems, where the burden and equality are being dual test.
Yeah.
Should we decide that we will take from the applied to those
Both. You can look at both. You can, in terms of reasoning, you can do both. You should look at it as it's just that a lot of times the analysis but they're completely different. Race, gender, class. Only when you get strict scrutiny. If you just run it on the case. At transit, it's not fundamentally reviewed on the rational basis review. But if method and use consider allocation, and also right to work it as a body case, then you have to think for relation. The more people are, the worse to be unconstitutional. But when you do on even if it's the same strict, that's a lot of people, doesn't make one person equality. So when you actually there with to do both. Think about it. Well, you should do strict rational basis. You should do. I thought your question was under one review and on. Okay, good. If it's a two different review, yeah. See, I mean, here's one. You can look at it from multiple norms, multiple rules, its own standard. The idea is actually extract. Okay. If you look at penny, then there that welfare is not considered. Okay, it's as simple as that. This is where the U.S. court 2005 HART. This German case, constitutional court looked at as this one. AFDC program, the computer standard of nuclear grant of $2 of family size will compute. This welfare program is the maximum family size. And the German, regardless amounts will be size. The German constitutional. U.S. constitutional court, fundamental interest, it's rational, or maybe we need to make sure that benefit. And then at this education case, one Rodriguez, right? Yeah, Rodriguez is the last, right? So here it is. Usually is that pay for school, which rich neighborhood schools, poor neighborhoods. The question is, what is equal protection? The court says, paragraph 4, we find neither fundamental interest analysis. Okay, looking at the issue. Well, poor people get lower college for living in. But the court says it's not discrimination against poor. So wealth discrimination, two distinguishing characteristics. At the bottom line, because of literally unable to pay for something, they sustain an absolute ability to enjoy that benefit. Or here, and sometimes you may get good education. A lot of poor people area, a lot of And then page 9, B, is education fundamental? The court said, page 9, fourth paragraph, whatever merit if a state's financing system denial of education, that argument provides finding an interference with relative differences in spending level, whereas it's true in the present We made that system fails to provide opportunity to acquire the necessary for enjoyment of participation in the political process. Monetary difference is not strict at all. Minimum school. Some schools, they do better. I mean, it's not really education is fundamental. But what the court says, even if it is fundamental, it is not taken away. It's not taken away right, because they are given minimum education. Every case kind of made it obvious whether education is a fundamental. The way it sounds if some schools are actually to be considered unconstitutional, right? They are all in school, just that, and meets the minimum. Democracy, minimum required for have more money, and those schools will invite to their parties. Schools cannot do. Okay, any here we'll stop the semester here. So thank you, and up on exam and other exam for the rest of you at our school. Okay.